Hello guys, this is TheLQ-Gaming, and in today's video I'm going to discuss Ice Might DPS in DC Universe Online, and specifically the power of Frost Blast. I am going to try to discuss it in depth and where or if it is feasible to use. A number of players in my last Ice video asked me about this, so I wanted to dedicate a video response to that, as I wanted to show some loadout examples utilising Frost Blast. Please note that this won't be a loadout video as such, as Frost Blast is a very situational option to use in the Ice Might loadout. However, I do want to showcase some things, as in the right hands and in certain content it can perform very well, and brings Ice Might DPS, both single target and AoE, to being one of the hardest hitting Might powers, even without usage of Iron Gemini. If you have any questions about Ice Might spec, gear, mods, etc., please check out my previous video on Ice Might, as any information I included there should still be as relevant as it is currently. Also of note, my Might is over 164k at the moment, 5,000 more Might than my last video. This is due to the most recent game update, which increased Might's skill point spec and the origin augments to 342. Frost Blast itself is a strong ability. It is 400 power cost and has a long cast time. I would use it after using something else that sets up the Frostbite power interaction. So in these loadout examples, I will be using Wintry Tempest. With Wintry Tempest and Frost Blast both in the loadout, I will need Strategist card and Transformation card, because you're going to want the crits, and with the damage over time you're going to be more likely to proc the Strategist card and passive. I tend to find this rotation that if I don't use Strategist card, my damage is much less. So both Transformation card and Strategist card are going to be very important to this rotation. Another thing to mention, so your third artifact in your second slot is going to be either Eye Gemini or Solar Amplifier, depending on your group makeup and that sort of thing. If it's a gem spam group, use Eye Gemini. If it's not, use Solar Amplifier. Another thing to really note with Frost Blast, and this is a pretty key point I'm going to mention, I want you to have this at the back of your mind. Any interruption, either from mechanics, if you're stunned, if you're jumping out the animation for whatever reason to get out of the way of something, if you're blocking, any kind of form change, so if you're an Ice Elemental and you get form change mid-cast, anything like that will immediately stop the cast. You don't do any damage during the cast from Frost Blast directly, you only do damage when it actually impacts. So that's something you're going to want to take into consideration, because when you're testing your rotation on a sparring target, there isn't really that interruption. You're not in a real world content situation, so it's going to give you a not entirely valid kind of idea of where Frost Blast is actually going to perform in content. Okay, so I have made a loadout. The loadout is Heat Vision, Glacier Flash the Finisher, Frost Blast, Robot Psychic, Wintry Tempest, and Ice Elemental. The Ice Elemental loadout is where things become complicated with Frost Blast. I could use the same loadout again with Blizzard as the 6th slot. The issue is the timing of casting Frost Blast. If I use Frost Blast and then I form change out of Ice Elemental mid-cast, I lose that damage, potentially millions of damage. Certainly on AoE, even on single target, you could be critting 800, 900k, maybe even a mil. You're going to lose that damage. If the timings line up and that doesn't become an issue, and I'm able to use Frost Blast in Ice Elemental and Blizzard, you're going to do really nice damage. So you could be hitting easily 2-3 mil, like maybe even 3 mil in that 10-second passer. That's not including buffs, orbitals, allies, etc. So you could be hitting really high damage. And again, obviously, if you've got an Eye Gemini focus group and you've got the procs from that, from using your supercharges, you're going to do even higher damage. Like I say, if you mess up that timing, you have nowhere else to really go with that rotation. You might be able to get Heat Vision in time depending on when you stop the cast, but you could have a moment where you can't do any abilities because you've messed up the rotation. and that is a problem because you're going to lose a lot of damage. Like I say, if for example you're using Ice Elemental, but you're not using a supercharger inside of Ice Elemental, it's not so much of an issue. It's not so much of an issue because then you can use Frost Snipe or Ice Boulder Strike, depending on if it's single target or AoE you're after, and you can put that in your rotation with Heat Vision and your finisher, and you still have Wintry Tempest for the damage over time in the PI interaction. And you're still going to do pretty decent damage with it. It's just not going to be as high, but it's going to be a lot more reliable. So you could go into Ice Elemental and you could have that a lot more often because you're not using any other supercharge for anything else. And then you can go between Frost Snipe. If the timing doesn't work out, you can still go into Frost Snipe as like a backup option. And then your damage is still going to be pretty decent. It's just not going to be like, you're not going to hit really high if you have enough gem spam to do more than what you're doing. I'm going to show you this rotational sparring target, and you will see that the passes are pretty variable, but they're pretty high end for might single target. Some of the passes go up to, I've sort of typically around 80k to 110, 120k. I've seen 70ks, I've seen 140s, 150s. Just depends on your crits and how they line up. Which is, I mean, like I say, if you're hitting 130s plus, is pretty high for single target anyway. But obviously there is that caveat of things can go wrong, which you wouldn't have. Like I say, you're not doing damage while you're doing a cast. Things can go wrong, and then you're looking at really mid to low damage for Ice Might. So it's kind of a gamble. And obviously if you're using Linnea's Amulet, you could probably do even more damage. But again, that comes with its own issues because it's 400 power cost for something that you may not be able to pull off because you get interrupted. Any kind of raid any kind of content where you're getting interrupted, you've got a hard stun mechanic, like Darkside War Factory, Phoenix Cannon. Anything that's going to stun you is basically a write-off for this particular power in Ice. I wouldn't recommend it because you're just not going to be able to pull off that rotation. You're going to be doing much lower damage. You're better off using Frost Knight, which is a bit more reliable, or Avalanche if you're more heavily art swapping, like I said. And even AoE. So if you're using Frost Blast for AoE, you can use Frost Blast for AoE. Some of your passes are going to be pretty nice. You might get you might get mid 200s, like 200, 250k maybe, 240k. That's pretty nice damage for AoE at the moment. But at the same time, ads are more likely to mess you up. Like if it ad stuns you or something like that, or you need to get out of the way of an AoE, and or ad does a reflex ability, you need to stop damage, you use that cast, use that damage, huge damage you're going to lose here. Like say millions of damage you're going to lose because you have to stop that cast. In conclusion, Frost Blast is something that if you aspire to be a top Ice Might DPS, to have at the back of your mind. Maybe one day you might have certain boss fights where you might be able to pull it off and have a go with it, see how you do with it. You might do really nice damage with it, but generally speaking, you're not going to see many Ice Might players run this particular power in their loadouts because it's just not realistic in terms of content. It might look nice on sparring targets in your league hall, House Legends, wherever you go to practice your rotations, but when it comes to actual content, have it like at the back of your mind. Maybe one day you might be able to use it and do quite well with it. Hopefully this video has given you some food for thought, and if you liked it and found it useful, then be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And take care guys, and I'll see you next video. Take care, goodbye.